Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. We now have reports from the game file revealing that Wildlight Entertainment's Highguard, the live service game that spectacularly failed this year, was secretly funded by Tencent, the Chinese entertainment conglomerate. Wildlight CEO Dusty Welch told the game business in January, quote, "We're an independent studio without the support of a big organization." Later, he told Bloomberg, "We don't really speak publicly about the business and the economics and the financials of our company." So this man sat in front of journalists and described that his studio was independent or indie, but one of the world's largest gaming revenue generators was footing the bill. That's not indie. That's the furthest thing from indie, or specifically indie culture, which they wanted you to believe that they were. Now, why does this matter? Well, Highguard launched to a peak of 97,000 concurrent players on Steam, and there are estimates that this might have had close to 1 million downloads across all platforms. But it received mostly negative reviews. Within 16 days, Wildlight laid off most of its staff. The official Highguard website has gone dark. The game, for all practical purposes, is dead. And I'm here to tell you this isn't an isolated incident. We're looking at a pattern. Tencent and investment conglomerates like it, Microsoft, EA, Embracer, Sony, are poison for gaming. They are poison for the developers who make games. They are poison for gamers who buy them, and they are poison for the long-term health of the industry as a whole. And today, we're going to prove it. Today's indie game shoutout is webbed. Swing through the trees, spin sticky webs, and make friends with bugs. Be the adorable spider you've always wanted to be. To learn more about this and hundreds of other indie games, visit our free Indie Game Discovery Network, fakeportal.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. Part 1. Invest, extract, abandon. Allow me to explain how Tencent operates. Tencent is one of the world's largest gaming revenue generators next to Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. They hold stakes in over 600 companies worldwide that we know about. In gaming specifically, they own 100% of Riot Games, 84.3% of Supercell, 80 or more percent of Grinding Gear Games, 40% of Epic, 30% of Larian, and they have significant stakes in From Software, Ubisoft, Paradox, Fat Shark, Arrowhead, Remedy, and dozens of others. This is a company with its hands in nearly everything. Since 2022, under global game CEO Michelle Liu, Tencent has adopted what they call a hands-on strategy. They deploy support teams of up to 1,000 people to embed inside their invested studios. They push studios to focus on what Tencent calls evergreen franchises, which is just corporate speak for live service games designed to run indefinitely and extract money from players through microtransactions, battle passes, and seasonal content. Studios are told to drop and give up their side projects, focus on the strongest bets, maximize retention, maximize revenue. Tencent is all on board the live service train. And when those bets fail, and lots of them do very often, when those companies fail to turn a profit, Tencent walks away. The studio gets gutted, the game dies, players who may have bought digital goods lose those digital purchases, and Tencent's name barely gets mentioned. Gamers now, in this instance, will talk about Wildlight failing with Highguard, not Tencent, the financier and directional advisor, having failed at all. There are trails of corpses left behind in the wake of Tencent-backed free-to-play and live service projects that are now dead, canceled, or had their studios totally destroyed. In research for this video, I counted 12, and I felt like that was enough, and that included games from Remedy, Epic Games, and Square Enix properties. And those are just the ones we know about, right? Because as we learned with Highguard, Tencent doesn't always tell the public when they're involved. Yeah, and there's something else here that's worth noting that further defines this idea we're talking about. An anonymous senior developer posted online in May of 2025 describing what they called Ghost Protocol. The claim is that when a Tencent-backed project underperforms, Tencent applies pressure through internal KPIs, key performance indicators, and the studio essentially self-destructs. The layoffs happen, closures happen, but Tencent's fingerprints are not on it publicly. The studio takes the hit and developers lose their jobs, but Tencent moves on to the next studio to invest in. And studio after studio continue to take money from the conglomerates like Tencent as if they're making deals with the devil. This is an investment pattern that can be defined as invest, extract, abandon. Part 2, suits cause decline. Okay, so that's how Tencent operates on the investment side, but the investment is just one step. There's a whole playbook that kicks in after the checks clear, and it has, in this case, 2 phases, which happen to result in making the games worse and monetizing what's left. In 2025, the consulting firm Bain & Company, one of the top 3 management consulting firms in the world, not a gaming outlet, there's no dog in this fight, published a report on the state of the gaming industry, and what they found won't surprise you if you've been paying attention. From 2018 to 2024, indie game PC revenues grew at a 22% compound annual growth rate. AAA and AA studios, the conglomerate-backed segment, grew at only 8%. Industries are outpacing the corporations nearly 3-1. And Bain noted it's not because more indie games are flooding the market. The amount of new games entering the market share on Steam stayed consistent year to year for this. The growth came from quality. People are buying more indie games because indie games are getting better. 75% of the top 20 highest rated games on Metacritic in 2024 were indie, nearly double the share from 2016. And when Bain asked players why they play their favorite games, 22% said gameplay. Only 7% said graphics or audio. 7%. Meaning the entire AAA model is built on spending hundreds of millions of dollars on graphical fidelity, and only 7% of players say that that's what matters most to them. So what does the conglomerate model actually produce? Well, let's look around. BioWare. It binds to EA in 2007, and later on we get Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, and Dragon Age Veilguard, 3 expensive games that left the studio a shell of what it once was. Halo, without Bungie, has been soulless. 343 was a corporate entity built to manage a revenue asset, not a creative studio. Remedy takes Tencent money, we get FBC Firebreak. Epic sells Gears of War to Microsoft, franchise dies. Volition gets acquired by Embracer. Saints Row Reboot kills the franchise and the studio. Arcane gets acquired by Microsoft. Redfall kills the studio. Fat Shark gets Tencent as majority stakeholder, and Darktide launches unfinished, losing 96% of its players. Same arc. Every time. It's the same story. It's the same arc. It's the same story every time. The studios earn their reputations through excellence. The corporations take control, creative direction shifts to whatever maximizes recurring revenue, the product suffers, the players leave, and the studio's legacies become cautionary tales. Wrecking the quality isn't the end of it. That's just the setup for the real play, which is monetization. Once a conglomerate is inside a franchise, the goal shifts from selling a great game to selling things inside that game forever. Microtransactions, loot boxes, battle passes, gacha mechanics, and studies confirm now what every gamer has already felt in their guts for years. The French National Institute for Computer Science found that 73% of players view loot boxes as gambling that should be regulated. The National Institute of Health published research connecting microtransaction mechanics directly to internet gaming disorders, which is a clinically recognized condition. The more aggressively a game monetizes, the higher the correlation with problematic behavior. And I actually did a very long and very important video breaking down how loot boxes were designed to create gambling habits. You should watch that here after you finish watching this. This one is important right now. Don't go away. But here's where it connects back to conglomerates specifically, okay? Star Wars Battlefront 2, that was EA, launched with pay-to-win loot boxes so egregious that it became a global news story about child gambling. That's EA. Apex Legends, EA again. Battle Pass changes so aggressively that the game bled 70% of its Steam player base. Honor of Kings, 100% Tencent, developed by Timmy, the same Timmy that secretly funded Highguard. This game was so addictive to children in China, the Chinese state media called it spiritual opium. The government had to step in and restrict how long minors could play it. That's a pretty big deal. Path of Exile 2. Grinding gear games. 80% or more is owned by Tencent. It lost 93% of its player base within weeks. Players have cited cosmetic items are priced at $45 to $85 a piece. You see the pattern, right? It's the same cycle every time. The conglomerate acquires or funds the studio. The studio gets pushed towards live service or free to play. The monetization mechanics get bolted up. Short-term revenue goes up, but long-term player trust goes down. The retention eventually drops, and unless you're Fortnite or CSGO, that game is on borrowed time. But the conglomerate has already extracted the value, and when the game dies, just refer back to part 1, as I said earlier. The company will walk away unscathed. That's the playbook. Acquire or fund. Shift creative direction towards recurring revenue. Monetize aggressively. Extract value. And when the well runs dry, just abandon it. It's invest, extract, abandoned. The astroturfing of fake indie gaming. Now let's go back to Highguard for a second here, because after it was revealed that Highguard was funded in part by Tencent, there was this very strange wave of content creators and journalists posting on Twitter saying things like, "Oh, this is common. This isn't a big deal. It's normal for indie studios to have secret corporate backing. This is how the industry works. Why are you getting so worked up over this?" What? No, this isn't common. At least not in the conventional indie cultured space. itch.io is loaded in indie games made by single developers or small teams with zero financial backing. I built Fake Portal, which is an indie game discovery network, and I've had lots of conversations with indie developers. They don't have Tencent money. They're mostly bootstrapping their games themselves. So the fact now that we have journalists and creators running defense trying to normalize and downplay conglomerate involvement with indie game funding, this should be as alarming to you as it is to me. Yeah, and here's the real evidence. According to GDC 2025 State of the Game Industry Report, more than half of all game developers are now self-funding their projects. Self-funding is a very important phrase here. Their figures show that approximately 60% of indie developers are bootstrapping their games through personal savings, through small loans, or reinvested revenue. Of the remaining developers who seek outside funding, the primary sources found are crowdfunding, government grants, cultural funds, and indie-focused publishers. Kickstarter alone saw video game projects raise $26.1 million in 2024 with an 83% success rate, the highest in the platform's 15-year history. That right there is developers going directly to their communities and saying, "Please believe in my vision and fund my dream." And that is true independence. But what scares me here is how the industry is trying to hijack this, because they know that gamers are moving in the indie direction. As we said before, indie has growth, and gamers are sick of AAA crap. My friends, if it is true that Highguard was indeed funded by Tencent, and these statements from the Wildlight CEO were misleading at best, then we are actively watching the term self-funded and self-funding be hijacked in real time. They are changing the meaning of self-funded to include corporate backing in order to mislead you. Indie means independent. Like, that's the definition. Independent of corporations. And then indie became a cultural term implying smaller budgets, smaller teams, but big vision intentions. And today, what I'm telling you now is that we're seeing these conglomerates co-opting the title indie to not only mean independent, but also to be a synonym for private business. Because indies are private businesses. They don't need to reveal their financials or where their money comes from to the public. It's almost too easy to hide their funding if they are being funded. Let's look at what editor of the game business Christopher Dring has to say about this. Quote, "Historically, Tencent has been a regular investor in new teams. You'd be surprised at how many other devs have secret, but not actually secret, Tencent backing. So with that information, that there are regularly studios that market themselves as indie while secretly being a big key word here, receiving conglomerate funding and were later exposed. How many of those games are out there? How many have been exposed for secret funding? None. At least to my research, none really, not yet. Highguard is the first one that was secretly funded and then revealed. I know that here people are going to point to Expedition 33 in the comments, but Expedition 33 was not done in the dark. Kepler Interactive got 120 million euros from NetEase. Expedition 33 was done for an estimated $10 million. That was not secret. Expedition 33 has been a AA game from the start. It's not really indie. And then there's things like Dave the Diver or Stray or Dredge, but like, again, these games might have been positioned as fake indie, but it was always clear these games had large publishers or large backers. As per my research as of right now, there are no other Highguards that I can find. None. And of course, I can't. They're secret for a reason. These companies don't actually want you to know that they got money from Tencent and or others. They want to appear indie in culture and in financing. Yeah, there are Reddit threads that speculate, there are vague forum posts here and there, but in terms of documented reported cases, Highguard stands alone here. I do not think we were supposed to know this. Whoever the sources were that blew this up were likely not supposed to say so. Okay, let's play this out together. Dusty Welch at Wildlight told the press his studio was independent. He told Bloomberg he doesn't discuss financials. Meanwhile, Tencent, through Timmy, was the lead financial backer. And here's something else worth noting. Tencent's senior vice president, Stephen Ma, sits on the advisory board of the Game Awards, where Highguard received its world premiere reveal in the closing slot of the Game Awards 2025. This is meant to be the big slot of the show. The last announcement, it's meant to be the best announcement. That placement was given to a game secretly backed by a company whose executive helps run the show. Now, yes, a Forbes article later confirmed that no direct payment was made for the slot, and I'm not alleging that payment was, right? I'm just pointing out that the optics for this entire mess are beyond terrible for everyone involved, including Jeff Keighley. Considering how much astroturfing and scapegoating and toxic positivity and manipulation is done daily to gamers in order to get them to just shut up and keep charging their credit cards, I can't blame anyone for looking at this whole situation and saying, yeah, they're all in on it, in their humble opinions. Oh, and this whole thing is not a victimless offense, right? The actual indie developers, the teams of 1, 2, 3, 4, who are making games on savings and sheer willpower, the ones competing on Steam where 14,000 new titles launched in 2024 alone, these developers are already fighting an uphill battle against AAA marketing budgets. If you speak to these people, most of them will tell you that they spent all their money making the game, and now the money is dried up for marketing. Most do not have a marketing budget or have any clue of what to do other than start making social media posts. Well, now these people are also competing against studios that present themselves as indie peers, but are secretly backed by companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars. That is astroturfing the indie space. Part 4, the market is consolidating. Yeah, and it's like at this point of the video, like that should be enough. We should just be cutting it right there, right? Yeah, Tencent and companies like it are co-opting the indie marketplace by secretly funding companies. Like, that's enough right there. But then we start asking why. It's not like loot boxes and live service games are going away. People are hooked on those games. They've done their job. Studies confirm that. There's plenty of money to be made in Fortnite and League of Legends. If people aren't quitting Marvel Rivals or CSGO, so why would Tencent and companies like it need to co-opt the indie marketplace? Why not let the indie space continue to grow on its own? Well, sadly, it's part of the larger picture. The Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or HHI, is a standard economic measurement used to assess market concentration. The US Department of Justice uses this to evaluate antitrust concerns, and an HHI above 2,500 indicates a highly concentrated market. According to analysis of 3 decades of gaming industry consolidation, the console gaming segment's HHI climbed to 2207 by 2021. Now that shouldn't be super surprising. The Top 4 companies control approximately 82% of the console market. That's not unheard of, right? We expected that. However, in 2023 alone, the gaming industry saw over $81 billion in mergers and acquisitions. For example, Microsoft's $69 billion Activision deal, Tencent's ongoing global expansion, Sony's acquisitions, Embracer's spree before it collapsed. The industry is consolidating at a pace that should concern anyone who cares about competition and innovation. You know, a lot of people talk about the video game crash, right? Like, oh, I can't wait for the industry to crash. Then they have to start making good games for me again. This is that crash. It's happening now. The biggest companies are squeezing everything and getting bigger. Like, that's the crash. Lots of us wanted to see line graphs plummet to zero, but the reality is that everything just consolidates. And what does consolidation produce? Risk aversion. According to industry reporting, 95% of major studios have been involved in live service game development. And in 2025, of 19 live service games that launched, 15 of them lost 80 to 99% of their player base. That is a catastrophic failure rate for a model that the entire AAA industry has organized itself around. They bet the farm on live service, and the farm is burning. But Wizard, why don't they just start making new games that people want? Why don't they do experimental titles? Why can't they make new things? Because they're risk averse, and they can't afford to risk $200 or $300 million because that's how much they need to spend to make these things. They can't risk that on something new that could underperform. They've become so risk averse that they've forgotten how to innovate. And if we stop to look around, a lot of other things start to make sense then. Halo is getting remade. Final Fantasy, remakes. Metal Gear Solid, remake. Dragon Quest, remakes. God of War is getting remakes. Even Kingdom Hearts 1 is rumored to be getting a remake. As I just said, the budgets for AAA games have ballooned to $200 to $300 million per title, which is ridiculous. But that also means every project has to be a guaranteed hit, or it's not getting green lit. And the safest bet is something people already bought once. But remakes and sequels aren't growth in this instance. They're just maintenance. They keep the lights on. They don't create the next God of War type franchise or the next Kingdom Hearts type franchise. They don't create the next Star Wars like franchise or Mass Effect or any other massive IP. They can't afford to take that risk because they're foolish. And these companies kind of know that. Bain's own data told us that only 20% of studios with a hit successfully launch a second one. So these conglomerates are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in combined market value, and they functionally cannot innovate anymore, or they refuse to. Their own models won't let them. The budgets are too high, the risk is too great, the corporate structure kills creative instinct before it can breathe. But do you know who can innovate? Indies. Small teams. People with a dream and a $50,000 budget who don't need to sell 10 million copies to justify their existence. The indie space is where every original idea in gaming is coming from right now. Bain confirmed it in the data, Metacritic confirms it frequently with new games and new reviews, the sales data confirms it. Indies are growing 3 times faster and producing 75% of the highest rated games in the industry now. And that gives us our answer. That's why Tencent seeds indie studios in secret. That's why Wildlight was funded by Timmy, while its CEO told the press he was independent. The conglomerates cannot make the next big thing themselves anymore, so they are going to where innovation still exists. They plant money in the small studios. They let someone else take the creative risk at a fraction of the cost. And if it works, they scale it, monetize it, and absorb it right into the machine. And if it fails, they were never publicly involved. There's no press release, no earnings call mentions. It's Ghost Protocol. Just a dead game and a gutted studio and a workforce that gets discarded while Tencent moves on to the next big bet. The industry generated approximately $195 billion in global revenue in 2025. The money is there. It has never not been there, but The conglomerates aren't using that money to make gaming better. They're using it to buy the people who do, or to secretly fund them and hope nobody finds out. So where does this leave us? Well, we've got a documented trail of dead games, dead studios, exposed lies. We've got academic research confirming what gamers have felt in their guts for years, that corporate acquisition makes games worse. We've got a consulting firm that advises the biggest companies in the world, not just gaming, telling us that indie games are growing 3 times faster and producing the best games in the industry. And we've got a studio CEO who looked journalists in the face and said he was independent while Tencent bankrolled the entire operation. Everyone keeps saying that gaming is dead, that AAA gaming needs a crash. The crash is here. It's happening now. Now we have evidence of the contracted companies at the top fearful of taking risks or making new games because they balloon themselves into positions where funding their own first-party titles is too risky. Dead live service games are being rounded up like Skittles, and the solution that Tencent and friends have is to attempt to blend into a place that is seeing growth, and do so in a place where the money is hidden from the public. It's desperate, and it's also nefarious in a way. There are plenty of reasons that gamers hate the gaming industry, and they have every right to. The industry has lied and scammed gamers for nearly 2 decades now into this version of gaming. And I can't blame gamers for watching Nintendo Directs and PlayStation showcases and Xbox streams and finish watching those things thinking, that was a waste of my time. Because it is a waste of your time. The Emperor has no clothes, and so the best thing we can do now is be as vigilant as possible. We, collectively, as a people, all caught on to the Highguard situation in real time. It just didn't feel right. There was something metaphysical about it. Like, you know what I mean? For everyone to look at that trailer and that announcement and in unison say, you gotta be fucking kidding me, man. That is a marketplace that has been pushed just a little too far. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire, and for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. I hope I got the message across in this video. I'm very self-conscious about this one, and I shot this many, many times, and I still don't know how I feel about it. This is a super important video that I didn't realize it would be.